one of the things with fraud is it's not static. And so we've rebuilt it from bottom up to update and build new models in record time so that we're always keeping up with the latest things that we see in our data. The fact is, when you can learn from data, it accelerates the speed with which you learn about the state of the world.
Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is Prem Natarajan. Prem is the chief scientist and head of enterprise AI at Capital One, a financial services company that earns nearly $37 billion in annual revenue. Prem has been in his role since March of 2023, and in it, he leads the technology strategy, architecture, and development for Capital One's enterprise data analytics and machine learning initiatives, including advancing its AI capabilities, tools, and research efforts. Prem joined Capital One from Amazon's Alexa organization, bringing more than 2 decades of experience leading science, technology, and commercialization efforts in natural language processing, speech recognition, computer vision, forecasting, and other machine learning applications. Prem has a PhD in electrical engineering from Tufts University, and he's on leave from an appointment as the Senior Vice Dean of Engineering at the Viterbi School of Engineering at the University of Southern California. He's also an advisory board member of the School of Data Science at the University of Virginia. Prem, welcome to Technovation. It's great to speak with you today.
Excited to be here, Peter. Thank you for having me on your show.
A great pleasure. Well, let's begin with your role, and a very curious and interesting and unusual title, I think, to most in the Fortune 500 at least, Chief Scientist and Head of Enterprise AI at Capital One. The Head of Enterprise AI, which I certainly want to get into, is probably a little bit more, in mind for our listeners and viewers. Can you talk a bit about the Chief Scientist aspect of that and how that applies to a business like Capital One?
Yes, indeed. I think it speaks to Capital One's forward lean in leveraging science. What we mean by science, of course, is largely rooted in data science and the use of machine learning technologies historically. So it takes, maybe I'll take a moment to step back and say, why did it make sense for Capital One to create this title and this role? Capital One, its founding itself is based on a differentiated use of data and insights from data. That is kind of how Capital One expanded access to credit for so many people and kind of made its initial foray into the banking world. And so there's a deep cultural reverence for data at Capital One. It was the first thing that stood out to me. My God, this culture here really reveres data and the insights from data. And so what that has done over the few decades that Capital One has been around is that reverence for data then translated to how do we bring in the latest techniques for analytics and to generate new insights from that data, how to use those insights to bring value to our customers and improve their everyday financial lives, right? And that then became a virtuous cycle. You have data, you're using better and better analytics to give better and better experiences to your customers, and that leads to more customer satisfaction and more customer interactions. That leads to more data and better. So it's just like this wonderful world that's been this flywheel that's been created. And so in that context, if you take a further step back and say, what does this look like? This really looks like bringing scientific rigor to how you practice your business. And that's another thing in the culture here that stands out all the way from the top, like from Rich. The sense of rigor and the pursuit of truth, the pursuit of excellence in delivering value to the customers every day, right? So look at that context. How has it manifested itself at Capital One over the years? We have a large community of scientists, right? Some of them are in the enterprise, but many of them are embedded in the businesses. They're very knowledgeable about the specific business practices, about the business models, the offers that we're trying to bring to life, right? So we have this community of scientists. And so one role of the chief scientist is to bring a culture of scientific innovation and to continue to strengthen it and advance it, etc. So that's why the chief scientist title makes sense. The head of AI, of course, AI is science. It's rooted in computer science and we think of it as science. So there is, by extension, it makes sense that to serve as the head of AI. But it's really the notion of scientific rigor in how we do everything, how we use data to make decisions, that I think is why I think so it speaks really more to Capital One's culture that this kind of role was created, and so happy to share a little bit more and shed more light on it as you talk along. But that's really at the core of why this makes sense in light of Capital One's unique culture for us to have a role like this.
Yeah, very interesting indeed. And you talked about the influence of the co-founder and still CEO Rich Fairbank in all of this. And I wonder, coming from Amazon to an organization like Capital One, as you described it, it now becomes sort of obvious why this was compelling to you. Were you surprised in finding that a financial services organization based in Northern Virginia was as technically and data savvy as it turned out to be?
In some ways, but let me tell you what moderates that surprise a bit. I was at Amazon before coming here, as you pointed out, Peter. And at Amazon, we always thought of Capital One as one of our beacon customers. So early to go all in on the cloud, so early to adopt modern technology stacks, etc. So we kind of had, to use the word reverence one more time, we kind of have at Amazon, Amazon is very customer obsessed. It's a fantastic culture in that way. And so when we see customers like Capital One, we kind of have a reverence for them, like how they are bringing their technology strategy to life and leaning in on like the most modern developments. And so I had a little bit of a sense of like the forward lean and kind of the focus on technology as a differentiator at Capital One, even from the outside. But however much you have from the outside, you also tend to contextualize it in this setting of it's a financial company, and there's the general sense of regulated industries and the speed at which they move, which is appropriate because you have to lead so much with managing risk properly, making sure you're protecting your customers, etc. Because finance is so central to people's lives and financial security is so central. So it's all appropriate to lead that way. But given that, I come in and I find this amazing tech stack. I find this amazing tech culture. I'll give you one example of a surprise, and it's a cultural one. After I joined Capital One, 2-3 months later, somebody came and said, "Hey, Prem, we'd like you to talk at CCon." What is CCon? It is our software engineering conference. How many people participate in CCon every year internally? Not all of our engineers, but turns out 8, 9,000, right? So that kind of culture where you have a technical conference for engineers, internally, it's a multi-day event where people are talking about the best practices they're doing, where we have speakers from outside. That culture is very reminiscent of a tech company culture, where you're not just using tech to advance your business, but you truly understand the transformative nature of technology. You're trying to stay up to date. You're bringing in the leaders from outside who can talk to you. You're elevating the leaders from inside who are using it in the best ways possible to provide the best products to our customers, etc. And so I was like, wow. Then there is a whole data week. That's another 2-3 days or longer. Another 2,000, 3,000 engineers will show up and join for data week because there's a focus on data engineering. I also lead the data technologies organization. And so there's a whole data engineering focus, right? Then we have the modeling and analytics conference where all of our science communities come. And now I'm pretty deeply involved along with many of the other science leaders across the company in organizing. And we bring in the best scientists across the world from academia, from other places to come talk to us. And our own scientists talk about their work. So that culture, so it's one thing to have a big investment in technology. It's one thing to leverage technology. It's another thing to have this kind of vibrant culture around technology. And that to me was like one of the most pleasant surprises to learn more about the culture and see how it manifests itself, Peter. So that was just, for me, to use a word that's maybe overused sometimes, magical.
Really, really profound. I appreciate that description of it, and really brings to life what is remarkable about this organization. I want to talk a bit more about the enterprise AI portion of your responsibilities as well. Clearly, of course, a remarkable trend that most companies are at least thinking about, if not diving into the deep end with regard to. Can you talk a bit about some of the your recent applications of enterprise AI that particularly excite you, of innovations that you and the team have brought to light?
Yeah. Again, maybe just a little bit of a tip of the hat to the history of the use of machine learning at Capital One that far predates me, right? Uh, because of that reverence for data, there's always been an import of the state-of-the-art analytical techniques and then also advancing them for use in our many different processes, etc. So machine learning has been core to the practice of finance and technology at Capital One. So we've found ways to bring that to life. And I'm offering that, Peter, just to say that there's a little bit of a continuum in how you see these things. It's if if you don't have this history of having valued data and therefore treated data as essentially a first-class asset, right? And then the use of analytics on that data as a natural resource for doing business in a much better way, much more effective, right? You're not really ready for this world of AI. You're also not really ready for this world of AI if you don't have a modern tech stack. And so in that context, one is that whole reverence for data. The other is actually the investment Capital One did by moving to the cloud. Moving to the cloud sometimes looks like you're leveraging some, commodity infrastructure that's actually much deeper, right? Because your whole development stack now is a cloud stack. So you're developing with the most modern tech stack that is available to the world today. So your tech stack is modern, which means your tech talent is really modern and forward thinking, right? Which also means it's easier for you to bring in new tech talent for every new wave of technology because they know they're building on top of the best that existed before, right? So they know they can bring their full impact to their work when they join Capital One. Right? So it's important to look at all of this history and say, so when we came here, we look at it and said, oh my God, we can really bring to life the next wave of AI technologies in the form of applications and services and solutions, both for our associates, our employees, and for our customers. So first, of course, I'll say this won't surprise you at all, Peter, given what we've just talked about, the centrality of technology to our way of life, is that, of course, we wanted to bring Gen AI into our tech infrastructure. And so our software development environment was one of the first areas where we brought Gen AI in, and it's now available to all developers at Capital One. It has been for a while now. They can all develop with it. But it also turns out to be a fantastic ground for learning because one of the ways in which we mitigate the risk of using Gen AI is with a human in the loop thing, right? So a key mitigant for us in our current test and learn phase of deploying Gen AI is to have human in the loop for pretty much everything we do. Now, software development turns out, even when humans are developing the software, there are other humans in the loop who review that software, provide them their comments, and then design inputs and code reviews and tests, etc. So that's one use case. Another was agent assistance. This goes to my sense that I've had for a long time that the noble aim of AI, Peter, one of the noble aims of AI is to transfer cognitive burdens from the human to the system, right? And so when you or I call a call center, we've been waiting for 6-7 minutes, if we are lucky, before you talk to an agent, right? So by the time the person is talking to the agent, they are already very keen to get their answer very quickly and have their problem be resolved. So the agent is aware of that pressure, right? And so they're trying to quickly answer the customer, provide them the value service that they're looking for. In that moment, anything that makes it easier for the agent to find the right answer and deliver it at the first shot to the customer makes it that much more satisfying for the customer, which means it reduces the burden on the agent as well, because they now have, if you make the life better for the agent, you make the experience much better for the customer. So we've built it out today. This thing is rolled out to all of our, to essentially all of our agent associates are using version 1 of our Gen AI powered solution to find and communicate answers to our youth. Notice again, here too, there's a human in the loop, right? And then I can expand it out. Fraud is another place where we're finding tremendous value to the use of both the statistical machine learning and the newer techniques, right? And then we have a whole platform approach to developing most of our technology. So we have well-managed platforms on which many users can explore the kinds of use cases they want to satisfy for themselves. So we're finding a plethora of use cases across the company around, report generation tasks, back office tasks, etc. So I think the future is going to be super exciting. But the most important thing is we're approaching that future from a test and learn perspective, so that every step forward is a definite step forward, not a tentative step forward which might need to be reversed. Right. So that's kind of key to our how we're approaching it.
I like that. Really very interesting to hear more about the way in which you organize. I wanted to ask, as you described this, I was thinking about the team that supports you, and I wonder to the extent to which it was a cohesive team before your role was created, how you were drawing resources from internally as well as recruiting those from elsewhere. Talk a bit about the constitution of your team, if you would.
Yeah. So overall, my organization, is several thousand engineers, scientists, technical program managers, product managers. So it's and risk managers. So it's a pretty multifunctional operation, right? It was pretty cohesive, and so the thing is, it's hard to make huge amounts of progress if you don't have a cohesive operation to start with, like in a short period of time. But the thing is, every new inflection in technology brings with it the requirement to both upskill your existing talent and to bring in some new experienced talent that is very proficient in the new technology. So the fact is that we had a pretty cohesive place to start with. And then we said, okay, here are the new talent that we need to add. And so we have hired people with deep expertise in the current wave of AI, deep learning especially. We've also hired engineers who are very proficient in how to translate those science advances into engineered solutions, how to bring to life platforms that provide these science capabilities, these scientific advances in the form of reusable capabilities for the rest of the enterprise to use and consume. So I'd say there's a fair amount of new talent that we've brought in. There's a fair amount of existing talent that has ramped up and learned all of these new techniques, et cetera. But even more important, though, Peter, is the mobilization across the company. Regardless of how much you invest in any particular set of talents or in some one organization, truly achieving outcomes that you want that change things for your customers and for your company, therefore, requires tremendous mobilization. And this is where another aspect of Capital One's culture, there's a tremendous culture of collaboration here. People genuinely lean into collaboration, and it's rewarded in many ways. Like the collaborative success is rewarded culturally in many ways. So there's incentive for people to collaborate. And so there's been a tremendous mobilization across the company, across different functions: engineering, science, product management, technical program management, risk management, audit, compliance, to bring to light some of our first use cases. We were talking about surprises, Ashar. I think that's another, I don't know, surprise or not, but just a pleasant discovery for me, how eager this community is to mobilize around achieving outcomes.
Yeah, again, fascinating to understand how you've thought about this and how the team has come together in the ways you've described. And as I hear you talking and reflecting upon how diverse the business of Capital One is, and as you provided some of the earlier context as to where innovation's happening, leveraging artificial intelligence, it brings to mind opportunities to enhance customers' financial journeys. I know this is an aspect that you're very passionate about. Across the various areas they might be customers in at Capital One, some in one area, others in multiple parts of the area. Talk a bit about how you think about that enhancement of customers' financial journeys in light of the business you're in and the ability for AI to be a catalyst for more cohesion across the business.
Yeah, I'll make two comments on that one that cover kind of the span of it. First is financial security of financial transactions is so key to our everyday lives, right? Any of us that has had any of our financial transaction compromised knows how much time it takes to kind of recover. I mean, there's resilience built into the system, but it takes time, right? So preventing, anticipating, and intercepting fraud is a huge area of work for us, right? I kind of alluded to it a short while ago, maybe referenced it a short while ago, but we've rebuilt our fraud platform from the ground up, right? One of the things with fraud is it's not static. It's not like the same fraud mechanisms or practice you have to, because everybody knows it is smart and you catch up. And so it's a little bit of a race, if you will, right? And so we've rebuilt it from bottom up to update and build new models in record time so that we're always keeping up with the latest things that we see in our data. This is often maybe not a very easy to grok point, but the fact is when you can learn from data, it accelerates the speed with which you learn about the state of the world. When you're engaged in transactions and interactions with customers, you have that data that's real-time snapshot of the world. If you can learn from this data, waiting for people to analyze this data, figure out different patterns of fraud, and then write rules and then bring them to life, you're already a little bit out of date. You can learn from this data quickly, then you can be up to date with the state of the world. So we have greatly reduced the cycle time that it takes for us to update our models. So our models are pretty much up to date all the time, reflecting the state of the world, combating fraud on an ongoing basis. Another place, so this is one area of work, these predictive models, if you will, like where we can use the power of prediction to provide value to customers. Another is actually, as the world, we all live very busy lives. There's lots of priorities we have to contend with. And so one of the aspirations we have is to meet our customers where they are, when they are there, in ways that they want to be met. And I think Gen AI unlocks a whole host of possibilities in achieving that destination of meeting them in the ways they want to be met, where they are, in ways that are convenient to them, etc. So that's a whole thing. I gave you a little bit about the agent assistance, but that's the start of the journey. There's just so much more to unpack there.
Yeah, fascinating. Again, I appreciate those perspectives, and love the way in which you frame the framing of that was particularly how it should help you learn at the speed of the world. I love that phrasing, that thinking further about how that can be. I wanted to also ask you, if you don't mind, a bit about I know the importance of multi-sector partnerships. I mean, you yourself, of course, come from the academic field. You have a PhD. You've been involved with academic institutions, as I mentioned in the outset. You've now had multiple prominent tenures at prominent organizations in the private sector as well. Talk a bit about how you think about the formation of partnership, the development of an ecosystem to breathe life into a very complex set of capabilities.
Yeah. There are 2 or 3 layers to that, Peter. So one is, I think some of the hardest problems in AI require us to bring together talent, the best talent in the world, to attack those problems. No single organization in the world, no matter how big they are, no matter where they're located, will ever have all the talent that it needs to solve these hardest problems that are important to be addressed. That is kind of at the root of my belief in the importance of multi-sector partnerships. Right? I also think it is the appropriate kind of free society approach to bringing to bear the best that we have across so many parts of our society to attack problems that matter to all of us collectively. Right? And so, third aspect to it is universities, academia, they're producing the talent of the future. We want that talent of the future to be as ready to hit the road running. This is a very competitive world. It's an increasingly demanding world. So what can we do to help make this talent feel ready for this new world? And that's a unique role industry can play in partnership with academia. So it is about how academia benefits industry in terms of bringing to world-class talent, people who are thinking deeply about specific problems for over long periods of times, right? And then how can industry bring in the immediacy of what is the current state of the world, et cetera, to that thing? And through that, many of our constituents are helped, right? As we make advances and we have these partnerships, we can bring those advances to life in our products, in our offerings, et cetera, faster than we can if we didn't have those collaborations. We're also better positioned to bring in the talent because these partnerships expose students to the problems that are relevant in the real world. And so they're already thinking about how to bring to life the learnings they have in the classroom to make a difference to the world they're going to live in once they leave the campus, right? And so the benefits are just huge. There is also, I think, the benefit that many of these advances today require so much resources. I think increasingly, this is not where I started when I started believing in the importance of multi-sector partnership. But increasingly, I believe sustainability requires multi-sector partnerships. Many of our problems are shared. Many of the solutions will be shared. So why not share some of the resources to bring to life those solutions and address those problems? And so to that end, we have started partnerships, multi-year partnerships with Columbia University, with a center that we've created there for focused on responsible use of AI in finance. We've started a center at USC for responsible decision making in finance using AI and machine learning technologies. We have a number of other partnerships with MIT, with University of Maryland, UIUC, etc. And we're growing those partnerships. We're very focused in making sure we're setting up these partnerships also to be sustained. Our goal is not to have like massive numbers of partnerships, but to identify the problems that we're interested in, problem spaces, and to bring in folks from academia and other sectors to collaborate with us in solving those problems.
It brings to life another area that I know that you're very passionate about, which is the necessity to include a diverse perspectives up front and in early stages of AI life cycles. And I wonder if you could talk a bit about that diversity, how you define it, how you think about it, frankly, how you achieve it.
Yeah, so this goes back to the notion of how do you make sure AI serves everyone, right? It is by having as many equities at the table as you can right from the start. Right. So to me, inclusivity, maximizing benefits, etc., they're not add-ons, whether it's privacy protection, as simple as something as transactional as that, but also more broadly, access to this technology, making sure this technology is as useful to as broad an audience as possible. It requires that you have representation of the perspectives and the modalities in which those people use it at the table right from the design stage. So when I was talking about some of the hardest problems in AI, some of those are around how to make sure your AI is broadly accessible. And so that also requires representation of many diverse equities at the table right from the design stage, then through the development stage, and again, crucially, in the testing state. Because unless you test your products and your technologies with as diverse a set of use cases and users as possible, you don't really know that you've met the needs of all of these different stakeholders or potential users either. So it's that culture that you start developing. If you look at some of the benchmarking that's happening today, Peter, in AI, it actually leverages the wisdom of the crowds in doing it. I mean, take a look at something like the chatbot arena, which is how most of the modern large language models are assessed, and that's kind of one of the very reliable indicators of model performance. It's a wisdom of crowds, people logging into chatbot arena, asking questions, voting on which output looks best to them, and it's a completely blind voting. They don't know which model they're preferring, the name of it, or et cetera. So it's not gameable. So I think there are these things that are super useful today in the world.
I wanted to ask you a bit about also the way in which you've managed your career, Prem. You obviously have a PhD. I wonder to what extent, you have a PhD and you've been involved with academic institutions. And I wonder how you've thought about, as you've been plotting your career, having a foot in academics, a foot in the private sector, whether how you've gone about, especially the recent leanings towards the private sector, if you foresee yourself going back to an academic institution full time again. How have you thought about that balance? You've had so many really interesting opportunities present themselves as a result of the depth of knowledge that you have now in multiple realms.
Yeah, I tell you this, like one of the absolute amazing aspects of America is how much you can pursue your passions. The enablement and the empowerment that this country or the system that we've set up gives you to pursue your interests and your passions over time. And so I've always been interested in technology. I've always been interested in problems at the frontier of technology for two reasons. One is that's where most of the learning is. So what I found is engaging in frontier problems means you're learning things that you cannot learn anywhere else, right? And so it has naturally fed my curiosity and my desire to learn. And so it's not like I optimized it to say, what is the most valuable thing to do next? It's more, where is the learning the most? And over time, where can I contribute to the learning of others as well? So initially, it all starts out being like, where am I learning the most? What's most exciting, satisfying to my curiosity? And then where can I also have most impact and be a valuable contributing member of the thing? That has kind of guided my trajectory. It's those values of trying to continue to learn, being able to contribute, be a useful, measurable contributor to the community that you're in, and then being able to drive impact and outcomes for some set of stakeholders. And so over time, it's really been that collection of things. In some sense, by the way, Peter, I kind of think of it as a very stable continuum for me. I'm still working on problems of interest. I'm still trying my best to make a difference to the work in the work that I'm doing and to the organizations that I'm affiliated with. I'm still trying to add some energy and joy to the communities I belong to. And I'm still trying to drive impact and outcomes in kind of roughly the same idea and in some same areas. And so the fact that I've moved across these, I think, is more is more testimony to kind of the opportunities that are available to each of us than like anything special about me in having, the only thing special about me is I've leveraged some of those opportunities, that's all I can say.
It's super interesting. And I love your framing also. It's part of the magic of the US that these kinds of opportunities are there for the
100%, no question. Yeah, no question.
Yeah. I appreciate that perspective. I wondered also, can you share a little bit about your own intellectual diet? You are, as you pointed out, at the frontier of really remarkable topics, and often looking to solve problems where the learning is, as you say. Talk a bit about how you educate yourself. I mean, we've talked about, of course, the ecosystem that you curate. We talk about the multiple worlds that you are a part of. You talked about the remarkable conferences that are internally focused that bring in thought leaders from around the world as well. Clearly, these are all part of that, in addition to being surrounded by very smart people. Anything else that you would add to that are critical aspects of ensuring that you remain current and as you go through your journey that you described?
Yeah, definitely. So I've also noticed changes in my pattern of how I've managed to stay. So I would say going 30 years back, there was a lot of reading and a lot of tracking. Back then you had like a set of journals you looked at, a set of publications you looked at, a set of research groups that you followed and said, they're leading in this area. The world was in many ways a much simpler place, Peter. Like there was There was specialization, there were curated venues for getting information, and you could count on those to go keep up to date. But over time, one of the aspects of the information explosion is we're realizing there is just so much creativity in this world. There are so many people with so many great ideas. But there are also so many things that just get published that many of those are hard to find mining through all of this data. So it's no longer possible to do what I did 30, 35 years ago in terms of following a few journals, this and that. What I've discovered, though, is your network that you develop over time is your most resilient learning mechanism, right? So as I've continued my wanderings through these different amazing groups of people, whether it's in the DARPA sector, and I would credit DARPA so much for creating the kind of technology culture we have in the US. And I was blessed to be part of that, sponsored area of work for many, many years early in my career. And then academia, and then now later at Amazon and now at Capital One. The network, when I form relationships, I nurture them, I keep that network alive. When something new comes up, I often know two or three people who are experts in that. And I'll go and ask them, hey, is this real? Is this something we should know about? Can we chat, etc.? So there are areas where I can add value to them in that way too. So this is this network where we are all helping each other learn. We're each other's filtering mechanisms to say, this is real. This feels interesting. We should learn more. This feels, I'm not so sure this hangs together, kind of thing. That judgment, that wisdom of the crowds that helps you stay up to date, etc. That's been super useful. It's also useful to have a network because then you hear slightly different opinions too. If you just have one or two anchor points, then you have the risk of like going down one thought process or the other. So a network also protects you from like too much buying into one particular thing or the other.
But we're as good as the network that we curate. I love that. And I wonder, is there anything that you've recently read, listened to, and or watched that you would particularly recommend to others? What are some of the things if I may actually call upon an older mode of the reading, more broadly into other things? Well, what are some things that have captured your attention that you would recommend to peers?
One of the things I do, it's not super new. It's not that old either. It's Thinking Fast and Slow. This book by Daniel Kahneman. The first time I read it, which was a few years ago, it was striking in the insights that it gave us. And also, what was really interesting to me was despite the fact that what they're trying to figure out is how our minds can sometimes fool ourselves, the ways in which they designed experiments for our minds to reveal themselves despite their attempts at protecting themselves. And I thought that was just incredible that they can. But the learnings from that, what I did not anticipate at that my first reading, but the meta learning from that there are systems of computation that are optimized to go super fast, and there are systems of computation that then go into a reflective mode and process the data a little bit more deeply, etc. And that those might actually come to life in all these advances that we're seeing now, in terms of like things that just very quickly predict the next word, but then complete things and that like operating super fast, or you're looking at an image and quickly gisting what kind of information is in that image. Those are all like these super fast, reflexive, computational things. And then the move towards more reasoning and more reflection. So much of this is kind of the science behind this anticipated in that book, even though they could not have known that Gen AI is coming. But that research has informed and provided us a framework for both understanding and advancing the current state of the world. So I kind of think of it as one of the most enduring value reads of modern times. This book by Daniel Kahneman and Tversky, his collaborator. But so that I've really enjoyed. There's been a few other ones, books by Thomas Piketty, capitalism and stuff like that. Bit of a heavy read, and I can't say I understood every page, but I kind of found it a pretty impressive work of scholarship. There's also all the books by Yuval, Harari, that have made me think about things in different ways than I would have differently. So anything that makes you think in a new direction is, to me, a good read. So
A good way to determine whether there is value there. I like that, Prem. Well, Prem, I want to thank you so much for such a stimulating conversation, indicative of the remarkable things you and your team are working on, thinking about bringing to life in a setting like Capital One. To learn more about your background and how you're oriented, it's really been a tremendous conversation. Thank you so much for taking time with me.
Peter, this was fascinating to me too. Thank you for leading me down a walk of curiosity and adventure. I totally enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.